Okay. All right. I would like to call the Environmental Control Committee meeting to order at 7:43. And Chuck, you'll have to stop me if I'm wrong, but present are committee members Heeman, Glassburn, Williamson, Council President Jones, Law Director Garreau, Council members Kelly, Schuman, Broussard, Limpert, Mayor Kennedy, Directors Lieber, Kopfer, and Glarner, Engineer DeFranco, and Rec Commissioner Drensky, Mr. Blum from the wastewater treatment plant, unless he dropped off, and guests. We're here this evening to discuss 2020-59 as the first item on the agenda, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a mutual aid agreement with Ohio WARN, a statewide water/wastewater agency response network, parentheses, WARN, end parentheses. Director Glarner, would you like to go ahead with this, please? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, as you said, this is a mutual aid agreement. As we've seen during this COVID epidemic, wastewater is also a very essential system. We have to have them just like we have to have police and fire because the plant has to remain running. So during this time, they came up with the idea that what happens if something were to happen to a plant or the personnel or equipment, what do we have as a backup? And it's like mutual aid agreements with anybody else. This gives us the opportunity to network with other wastewater treatment plants or water treatment plants throughout the state. And it's run by the state, helped pushed by EPA. Rather than go into all the dynamics that I have read, I think Superintendent Blum is here and he'd probably be able to explain it better.
Before we go to Mr. Bloom, Director Glarner?
Yes.
I did go to the website. I have read all 9 pages of the agreement and I went to their website. So this is a brand new endeavor, is that correct?
That is correct.
This is not, yeah, okay. And do we know how many participants there are? The website wasn't clear.
I do not.
Okay, well, maybe Mr. Bloom can speak. I'm sorry, thank you. Mr. Bloom?
And before you, and this
Yeah.
is sent to the law department, had them look at it also.
Sure.
Are you on?
I can't hear Mr. Bloom.
Madam Chair, he's still muted.
Ah, okay, thank you.
And he might need to call in.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, basically that is, since our Brian can't get on, that is the crux to the whole thing. This is a mutual aid agreement, just like police.
Yeah.
We have with police, fire, and gives us the opportunity to share resources, personnel, and equipment with other wastewater treatment plants in the event we have an emergency.
One of the things I'd like to clarify, having read the agreement and gone to the website, I'd like to clarify for committee and council, is that we are not required by any means to assist unless we feel we have the ability to assist. So there's no mandate for us to have to, step up unless we evaluate that our own situation will let us lend a hand. Is that true, Director Glarner? Is that your interpretation?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. They will reach out and say, hey, we need this. If we can help, we can help. If we can't help, we can't. And should this become problematic, it also gives us an out. All we have to do is give them written notification and we can withdraw at any time.
That is my understanding as well. Are there any questions from committee? Chuck, you'll have to call on somebody because I can't see.
Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any hands.
Thank you. Any questions from council?
Madam Chair, again, I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay, I would then like to make a motion to recommend 2020-59 to all of council and ask for a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes 3-0. And the discussion of 2020-59 will conclude at 7:47. I would now like to begin our discussion about the drainage projects, really, that are parcels of land that the city is trying to acquire from the Ohio Department of Transportation that will assist with our drainage problem and potentially likely assist with some of the flooding issues as they did in other wards. And I will ask Director Lieber if she would like to speak to that first, or if Mr. DeFranco would like to speak to that first.
Councilwoman Heeman, I think the mayor is interested in having the first introductory remarks.
Excuse me, Mayor. I would
Yes.
prefer, I just would prefer an overview of the engineering side of this for the pleasure of the committee and council before you then go next, please.
I'm just going to make a quick statement here, and then you can get in the engineering side of things.
Mayor,
So,
Mayor, Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. DeFranco, would you just briefly go touch on the engineering side of where these parcels are located and how they might assist?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So last year we completed 2 drainage studies. One was for the stormwater system and one was for the sanitary sewer system, both south of Lorraine Road. And as part of those studies, we looked at various alternatives for improvements to the system. So for the stormwater system, we looked at, I think, 7 alternatives, which included adding storage, increasing culvert sizes at various roads, as well as adding culverts or bypass pipes. And overwhelmingly, the best solution seemed to be adding storage in various locations. So based on that, we looked at available land throughout the south part of the city, south of Lorraine, and identify various parcels that are currently controlled by ODOT along I-480. And there's basically several locations ranging from Fitch Road to Stearns Road.
Okay, thank you. And Mayor, thank you so much for waiting. I appreciate that. But I wanted council and committee to understand where those parcels were before you addressed how they're helpful, or however you arrived at looking at those in conjunction with engineering. So please go ahead.
Are we waiting for the mayor? I think he's muted.
Okay.
Madam Chairwoman, this is Councilman Glassburn. Maybe in the interim, it would be a nice courtesy for us to hear out the caller that previously expressed interest in talking about this subject.
Yes, that would be fine. Normally, Mrs. Brewer, normally we go to committee and director positions for discussion. We go through council folks discussion, and then we come to residents, but you've been very patient. Thank you, Mr. Glassburn, for pointing that out since I have no screen. So would you like Mrs. Brewer to speak now?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And
Mrs.
Brewer, I need your full name and address, please, for our record.
Nancy Brewer, 5695 Revere Drive, North Olmsted.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. I just, we've owned this house has been in our family for 57 years. There was no flooding until, for the first 25 years of ownership, there was one flood. And then since 2011, there's been 3. So I don't know what can be done. I'm pleading with everyone to come up with a solution. I mean, this flooding, even if your basement doesn't flood, it's going to affect your property value because it's on the news, And a week ago Friday, the Revere Drive was flooded all the way up to about Gloucester. So hundreds of houses, and people couldn't even drive down the street because there was about 6-8 inches of water all the way across, and flooding that high school. I suppose it's a multi-million-dollar high school property back there. I mean, it's just trees now, but I suspect that has a lot to do with all this extreme runoff. So anyway, if I wish there was something that could be done, please let me know if you know of anything. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Mrs. Brewer, I assure you that that is why we're meeting this evening, because there have been efforts in the past to fix, add drainage, to add retention for the water to be held and then slowly let out. And it has been successful in other areas of the city. And we are now recognizing that we were attempting to work with ODOT, and I think they were a little, and we now recognize that as a collective council, we probably have to make a bigger statement to them, through our director Lieber, or somehow to move that along for the city, and of course all of our residents suffering like you. I know that Councilman Schuman had a very big burden in this last storm, and so I set this meeting on the agenda so that we could discuss it collectively and come to solutions and push, if we have to push, the right places to get what we're looking to do. So I thank you for your comment. And Mayor, if you are ready.
Madam Chair, I believe he's still.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Madam Chair, I believe he's still muted. His screen's off, and I'm not. He's showing as muted.
Okay, and then Director Lieber, would you like to, help us along with the steps that you have taken toward this project with the parcels that Mr. DeFranco, pointed out?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So Mr. DeFranco had mentioned 2 studies that were concluded last year, one for the South Interceptor and one a root stitch hydrology model and study, and how it both created different options and potential projects and we could see like the impact of that project. We could look at the cost of the project versus the value of how much it could handle a storm event. And again, Mr. DeFranco had said, we found that for stormwater and above ground retention would seem to be the most cost effective and impactful in our city. So once we started looking at vacant land in the community, we identified several parcels we thought the state could help us with. We reached out in September of last year, was our first contact. And I think our first meeting with their real estate individual was right at the end of the month of September. At that meeting, I would say he accurately set our expectations that the state doesn't dispense with their property slowly, that it is a long process. So I just want to put on the record, we don't believe that the state's being unresponsive to the city. We just know that they have many layers to go through of their own bureaucracy and their own chain of command. So he had said it could easily take up to a year to go through the process for property acquisition. So of course, we've stayed in touch and we've tried to speed along as we've identified some parcels for their feedback. After the rains in May, I made a point to make sure that we are still on their radar and hopefully raise our request to the top of the pile. As of last week, he said that he hoped to have more information to me by the end of this week that we could share with council at that point. So we're kind of waiting for some confirmation or some additional feedback. But meanwhile, we know that those are just some potential properties that we can consider. We don't want to be too narrow in our focus, so that if there are other properties in the vicinity that could be used, we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. So we're starting to look at some of these other locations and see if those areas could be considered and who owns the property. In some cases, it might be city property. What's the feasibility? So I'll just say it's a broad-ranging effort to find locations for these needed projects.
Okay. Can you please, you must obviously have a list of properties that, have been looked at for purchase. or consideration for purchase other than the ODOT properties. The reason I'm focusing on the ODOT properties is because they were actually in the newspaper and ODOT was kind of thrown under the bus. I don't think that they do things quickly. I'm not doubting that, not one bit. It's, the state of Ohio, they had the same kind of COVID and all kinds of craziness that everybody else did. I understand that the gentleman was potentially also at that time new to his position. So there were other factors. I'm not at all disputing that with you, Director Lieber, but unfortunately, again, yeah, you're saying not putting all of our eggs in one basket, and I think that's great, but council has no idea what other things are being considered. No one has shared this information with us, and sadly, as you know, we all know, we get the phone calls. And so we really need an update. I'd appreciate, I did ask you to submit a written update to me. I do not have it. So I don't know what happened to that. If you could tell me why didn't I get it?
Madam Chair, I had a conversation with the council clerk who indicated that an email that I had sent, I believe.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I apologize then. I did see that email. So my apologies. Chuck and I didn't communicate after that. Then I did ask him to find out whether that email was sufficient, and I didn't hear back. So thank you. I did read it. How do we now pursue helping you and Mr. DeFranco and the mayor to push this through with either ODOT or some of the other parcels? I think we need a collective effort, Director.
And I also want to point out that we did send you an exhibit that showed some of the locations of consideration and
Yes.
the areas that we felt would be impactful, especially for the areas that most recently experienced flooding. We continue in the administration to reach out to our counterparts in different agencies, and we'll reach out to property owners as appropriate as we identify maybe option one maybe didn't work, we'll look at option two. I think focusing communication through the mayor's office and through myself is the way to go. So I just encourage council to keep in touch with the administration. And I guess I wouldn't encourage just
Director,
outside communication.
Director,
that could potentially
I'm going to have to stop you.
Members of council and ODOT, for example. So I prefer the coordination to come from the city, and I appreciate council's in the position of getting these calls and has great concern about reducing drainage issues in the community. Okay. And we'll continue to work hard on your behalf.
Director, I have a different opinion. I don't think that council should be chasing down you every day to find out what's going on. I believe that as the environmental chairperson, that I would like a weekly update as to what conversations you've had, who you've reached out to. And I think that it's the administration's responsibility to keep the, council informed. When I try to get information, it's not always easily transmitted to me, and that is unfortunate. We are now in a dire situation, I personally believe, and I think that I know for myself and a few other of our council and committee members that we have other perhaps contacts that can assist, and if the administration is reluctant to accept that help, then I think that's unwise. So I'm going to ask for an update from you on a weekly basis to the environmental committee. If I need approval from the mayor to do that, please let me know.
I can discuss it with him.
Okay. Are there any questions from our committee?
Yes, Madam Chair. This is Councilman Glassburn. Sure. If I can go ahead.
You have the floor, of course.
There's a number of issues. I'll try to break them into groups, but on this first subject of ODOT, ODOT was explicitly thrown under the bus in the media. And when at least I followed up and asked for information, the response I got from the director was that we weren't to talk to ODOT or to talk to anyone, and we should only go through her. I find that response, not only that's not information on the actual question, but that response completely inappropriate and unacceptable. Once we have said whether it's a project for the county, we can't get a hold of an employee, or ODOT isn't being responsive to us, we have now made it a much larger issue. Our state representative and state senator I reached out to, neither had heard of this project or were aware of it. And naturally, their response was, well, if you had called and asked, we would have been glad to help. That's part of the strengths each of us bring in terms of relationships. But that's also a step of if ODOT actually is the problem, we should have reached out to our state representation. And so I'm gonna stop, Madam Chair, on that for that point, and I'll come back when we get to another point in the conversation, because all around on that, it's just very upsetting.
Thank you, Mr. Glassburn. I too would like to express that, I think that things become dire when our residents are, one is arrested and another is beaten up. And I think that is absolutely unacceptable, to not want the help of collective counsel in solving a problem. I think that is in part what we're here to do. And I think the administration should really, I would hope, work with us rather than not. Are there any other questions from committee?
If I can
Sure,
respond.
go ahead. Sure, yeah, Ms. Lieber, go ahead.
We absolutely need council's help. You are the folks that hear from our residents and hear their concerns. Our lines of communication are always open to you. We are here to work on our residents' behalf. When information has been requested of us, we've done our best to provide it timely. I did not instruct council on not to communicate. I respectfully request.
I saw the email, Mrs. Lieber. Please stop. I saw the email.
I'll be happy to share it with council so you can just decide for yourself. But
you instructed Mr. Glassburn not to reach out.
I ask that we keep your lines of communication so that we can understand where each agency is at and who the point people are. I never meant to tell council that we don't need your help. Of course, we're a team and we work together. And we need.
I'm glad to hear that, because we're going to have to do that going forward. This is a very big issue, and our residents were really, really not only impacted by their property values, their loss of property in the flood, but seriously, a newspaper article, one beaten up, one arrested, unacceptable. So I am requiring a weekly update to the environmental committee, all three of us, please, as to what is now going on and how then we can work with you to get that done. I'd be very happy to meet with the mayor if you need me to do that, Mrs. Lieber, because I understand that you don't report to us. I get that. So I'm happy to help you with that endeavor, but please, that email was just not appreciated, I'm sure, by Mr. Glassburn. Is there any other question from committee? And if not, then any questions from council or suggestions?
Madam Chair, Councilman Schuman has his hand up.
Please, Mr. Schuman.
I'm a little bit confused. Twice now I've heard that we threw ODOT under the bus. Are you referring to the quote that that I gave to Cleveland.com? Is that what you're referring to, Mr. Glassburn?
Yes. Mr. Glassburn, reply to that, please.
I'm specifically referring to our meeting on this platform where both the mayor and I believe the director said that ODOT was the holdup. And so I saw it also in the media where that was your statement, but it was reinforced in our meeting with this body.
Well, to be fair, I didn't throw anybody under the bus. I mean, what I said was that these projects that we had the money in place and we're waiting for ODOT, and that is a legit thing to say. I didn't rip on ODOT in the least. That's not the case at all. I didn't muddy them at all. That's not appropriate, and I'm really uncomfortable being called out on that, because what I said was a fact. It's just a fact.
Well, Mr. Schuman, Councilman, it is a fact, and I think that perhaps a stronger fact to one person and a lighter fact to somebody else, but it is a fact, and we are not disputing that it's a fact that they were kind of slow. So,
that's not even what I said. I said we were waiting for them, which can mean a lot of things. It means just what I said, that we are waiting. We're waiting to hear from them, and that's what's going on right now. Couple of, if I may, couple other things.
Sure,
and just to get, let's talk about the actual issue here, okay? Let's not talk about ODOT or anything else. So there are two, south of Lorraine, there are two big ditches, okay? One runs along Lorraine and then drops down and heads toward the high school. There's one that runs along 480 and then heads toward the high school. Since I've been on council, we've replaced, I believe, 4 of the culverts that were falling apart and probably were pinch points in the system. And then the work that was done at the high school. Now, Ms. Brewer brought up the high school, and she said in kind of a negative way. I don't know if she's still in line or not, but she said in a negative way. The reality is that what happened at the high school was to create some water retention. The creek was shelved out in order to create a situation where water had a place to go. And both of the creeks come together behind the high school. Now that didn't exist before. That it was actually just creeks, and we had that land would water would run right off that land. And I think we probably would have had more flooding if what was built back there wasn't built back there. So from that standpoint, I mean, that was a good thing. And the reason that was done is because the city insisted upon it, and the state of Ohio, EPA, insisted upon that being built like that back there. So obviously it wasn't enough. And right, we need to build more.
And we agree with that. Mr. Schuman, we all agree with that. And that the steps that have been taken in the past have worked phenomenally well. I think Mr. Broussard can attest to that as well. So we're just now looking to have to do more, and probably on a little quicker timeline than ODOT might like.
Well, I can attest to 7 inches of water in my basement as well as most of my neighbors, and you know, people having to stand waiting for the water to recede to get back to help their elderly parents down the road. So, you know, you're saying that helped, but I'm saying the opposite. So,
well, it did, because if you look back there was a lot of water back there that would have been in basements. That's the reality. So,
Mrs.
and now I'm not arguing about. I understand that. That's your mother's house back there. Is that correct, Mrs. Brewer? I mean,
now it's my house. She died. It transferred on destiny, but it's been in our family for 57 years.
I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, Mr. Schuman, if I may.
Go ahead.
1 second. Mrs. Brewer, I think what Mr. Schuman is trying to say is not that it remedied the situation, but that it did in fact help. And I know that it doesn't seem that way to you, but it was required that the high school be moved forward because it was sitting in a floodplain. So there was retention there, you know, so it just wasn't enough. We have to do more, I think, is what we're all saying. Is that correct, Mr. Schuman? We're all just
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. It did help. We all agree, but we need to do more. And Mrs. Brewer, that is, you know, what we are going to be doing for all of you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
If I may continue, there's a couple of things that, you know, I like the idea. I think the one location was at Stearns for a retention basin. I believe that's correct, Pete. And that would be an open retention basin for stormwater, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other one you guys were talking about was somewhere near Fitch for
Bellevue,
a sanitary.
Bellevue?
For a sanitary.
Correct. Yes.
That would be an EQ basin, right? That's, oh, sorry. That's what I was told a while ago. My concern is, as long as we're talking about this, my concern is both of those, at least the one at Stearns, would certainly take pressure off the southern creek. Right. I'm concerned about the northern creek. I think we had a lot of flooding in Breton Ridge because of the northern creek. And I'm wondering if we could take some water out of that somewhere.
Well, Mr. Schuman, I'm going to count on you helping me and the committee to look into some of this. As I mentioned, it's a collective effort. We have to all just work together with the administration to get this done. We can't let ODOT be slow. We don't have a lot of time for that. If we need to look at other properties, then perhaps we should collectively start, saying, okay, let's try this one, and let the administration move forward on that. I think it's no longer a good idea to sit back, all of us, and wait until the next rain, and then we get a report on what the administration has done. I'd like for us to be a little bit more proactive. So I'm hoping that you will offer your knowledge and assistance to us as a group to help with that.
All right, absolutely. I mean, I
Thank you.
honestly, with all due respect to Mr. DeFranco, I think I probably know those water lines better than anybody that set up, just because I've seen it at its worst and at its best. So I know where the pinch points are, and I have
Okay.
a couple ideas about where we could park some water myself. So
Well, we'll be having other meetings, positive meetings. I just need to make sure, though, that we do this as a collective effort, because, if we had maybe pushed a little more with, collectively, maybe ODOT would have been further along in the discussion with us, and maybe we would have had a better answer for the residents than we do right now today. So hopefully we will arrive at these conclusions and decisions, and we have the money. That's not the issue. We're taking no money from anywhere else. It's already in our sewer fund. So I think that we'll be able to get this done. I do. Do we have any? Do we have questions from? Go ahead, Chuck.
Yes, ma'am. Councilman Glassburn and Councilman Lippert both had their hands up.
Yeah. Well, if you'll call on them in order of how you see that, because I see nothing.
Councilman Glassburn first, and then Councilman Lippert.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were two other issues that I wanted to bring up, but the first and the only one I'll mention for the moment, and then let Councilman Lippert go ahead, is my understanding was that in addition to the ODOT properties, we potentially either had Board of Education or other properties that we were looking at in this. And I'd like to understand where we're at with that. I've offered to be of assistance to try to talk to the new school board members on this issue. But I've not heard anything, and I've asked for a number of times, and I'm wondering where we stand. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Glassburn. I think that we will get a report. I've asked Director Lieber to give us a report for next week, and she can circulate that to all of council. And Director Lieber, if you would include all of the other potential properties, including those that Mr. Glassburn might be mentioning, that would be great. And then the administration and the chair, Mr. Glassburn, will all, decide how to approach that, because I don't know, we'll have to decide who's going to be the point person on that when we get to that, and we do have an update on all of the properties under consideration, if you're fine with waiting for that report.
That's fine, Madam Chair. I just don't want it to be the same issue we have with ODOT, that if there's a way for us to motivate their action faster, then let's do that.
I understand, because actually Mr. Greenspan, when I had to talk with him on another issue, not this one, did mention this one and said if we need help, he stands ready. So I think we've got enough people willing to roll up their sleeves and let's get this done. So let's get the report first about the properties, and then we'll go from there. Are there questions from Mr. Lippert, I think was next, yes? Mr. Lippert?
I had a question first for Mr. Blum around when we regain capacity during that event, as we're going around there. Curious, how long? Can you guys hear me?
Kind of, yeah.
I was trying to find out from Mr. Blum when we regain capacity from the wastewater plant from the event.
Wastewater plant regained capacity the day after, and we started draining down about 24 hours after the storm for the EQ tanks that were out in the system.
Okay. Yeah, one thing, the reason I said that is I noted I went early morning by the high school, and that retention had completely drained, and I wasn't sure what that looked like compared to when we had capacity around that retention.
Yeah, the school is not necessarily tied into any wastewater structure. It's strictly for storm water. The tanks generally hold water until the lift stations are able to handle the flow, and then we start draining the tanks back. So the lift stations either have a 2-pump or 3-pump configuration. And when the 3 pumps stop pumping at maximum capacity, then we start draining the tanks. So they're more dependent on how the lift stations are running rather than what anything's happening with the surface water infrastructure.
And then the other thing I wanted is I think there needs to be.
Sure, go ahead.
I think we need to work with Arcadia in regards to how the street retention works. So in that, I think a lot of people are concerned about water in the street when some of it was by design. So again, I think that's important that we educate residents on the way this is supposed to work, so they can better know what to worry about and what not to. I had somebody complain that the ditch was full, and I'm like, well, that's a good thing. It's better to be in the ditch than somewhere else. I think we just need to continue to educate people as well on what right looks like and where the issues. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
The problem is people don't want to hear that when they have water in their basement too. So that's a problem. People don't want to be educated. They just want this fixed. Let's just keep digging whatever we can do. Just keep hammering away. I mean, it has to be understood though that for 50 years nothing was done, and 10 years ago we started putting in water retention and fixing culverts and cleaning out catch basins. There's a lot of lack of maintenance before 10 years ago. That's a reality. The 2011 flood really started a lot of work, and I mean we put a lot of money into the city since the 2011 flood. That really kick-started a lot of what we're doing.
And Mr. Schuman, we agree. We really do. And I understand all of those things. But now, we've got to finish the work, and
Absolutely.
and that's the way it goes. And if we all have to jump in, we all have to jump in, because, we're not dragging our feet, right? Right. Other people are. And, so sometimes that's 7 pushes are a little better sometimes than 1. So we'll work at this, and hopefully we'll finish our work. So, all right. Was there anybody else, or did you want to say anything else, Mr. Schuman? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's fine. I'm good. I appreciate you had the meeting. That's fine. Thank you.
Mr. Schuman, we're going to have more. We will finish the work.
Good.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Councilman Glassburn has his hand up.
Oh, Councilman Glassburn, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to highlight that while clearly the worst issues happened in the southern part of the city, that we have persistent issues that I don't think are related to any of the items we've discussed, at least within my ward. The streets with the open ditches, the Maples, the Clegg, Walter, Gessner. I got repeated calls and emails and helped 3 different residents myself bail out their basements on those roads. We had a couple other roads, Alexander, that's not an open ditch, but it's right next to one of our main drainage areas. The intersection of Clegg and Lorraine, once again, was a swimming pool for a period of time, which scares residents to the point of the street flooding. So we have made a lot of progress. I didn't hear about developmental flooding for the most part in my ward, but there still are other issues out there to be solved. And if it's getting residents' properties individually, or churches or others to create retention throughout the city, I'm happy to do that. I've actually indicated that multiple times, but I need to know where those things need to occur in order for it to be useful. I don't want to just ask residents at random for use of their property. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are you, Mr. Glassburn, are you asking about, would something like a report of when, some of the ditches were last cleaned out and some of those things, would a report like that or information like that be helpful to you in your ward?
I believe so, Madam Chair, and best practices, but again, quite frankly, I don't know if the open ditches make sense in the first place, or if digging them out is throwing good money after bad. I'm not an engineer. I don't know how these things are
Yeah,
best.
I agree. When I first became on council, I had some of that same issue where residents were permitted to put drainage pipes through and they underneath their driveways, for example, and draining their ditches, but they paid for that themselves. And then I understand that that was no longer permitted. But we can explore that issue, offline with the service department as a start. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure, and then we can roll that into our discussions going forward with regard to, some of the underground retention as we move into more discussions about that, and then we can kind of add that as a component to it. Yeah?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Anybody else?
Madam Chair, I'm not 100% certain, but I think Council President Jones might have wanted to say something.
Sure.
She reached out, so I think she might want to.
Yeah, tell her, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. GoToMeeting decided that I should not be on the call, so I I should say on the video. So I'm calling in, and I just wanted to recommend, and perhaps you did discuss this when I was struggling to reconnect to our meeting. But one thing that I found helpful, and especially in your call as a collective council, is simply putting on paper, sending a letter from all of council, signed all of council, both to ODOT and then also to statewide elected officials who weigh in on these issues and obviously control the budgets down in Columbus. And so that would be something I would definitely suggest as well as we move forward. As far as council taking action, that would be something I would recommend. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Jones. I do believe that is one of the steps that we will be taking. And so I think that we'll be circulating anyone that has want to submit a draft of a letter or statements that you'd like included. Please just send them to our clerk of council, and then we can put together a draft letter for everyone's approval so that no thought is left out. And I hope that we can get that done within a week. And if there are any other questions or comments, Chuck, do you see anybody?
Madam Chair, I'm not seeing anyone, Madam Chair.
Okay,
Chuck,
yes, Mr. Schuman.
Yeah, thank you. The idea of doing this collectively as a letter, I think, is a good one. It's a lot better than everybody reaching out separately. I think there could be some confusion in that, and perhaps because Mr. Franco and Ms. Lieber know so much about this, maybe they could help us with that letter. Maybe they could help us with.
I hope that they will provide comments, yes, and their input, absolutely. But I do think it's important that, that the environmental committee be kept up to date, because there's no way that I can, tell the rest of council what's going on if the committee, the chairperson isn't informed of what all is going on with this. So that's where I think we've had a little bit of a disconnect. In the past, maybe we didn't need that sort of contact, but I think we do now with the way that things are now. So I am going to ask for that. And I do know if there aren't any other comments, I would like Director Lieber to address. I know that the mayor is planning on having some resident meetings. I know I had nothing in my ward really to report. He was planning, I think, on having 10 people. Obviously we can't have gatherings, so I didn't know how he was going to really promote that and undertake those meetings. Director Lieber, perhaps if the mayor is available, perhaps he'd like to speak to that, and if not, Director Lieber, perhaps you would.
Madam Chair, I don't see him chiming in here. I know we're preparing a presentation of sorts, like a PowerPoint that could run on our cable channel on our website and that could be used for these meetings. I think I'm not sure how he's going to sign up residents, but he's sensitive that we need to limit the group size, and we want to make sure we get all the information out and also use this as an opportunity to get information from those impacted residents. So it's a bit of data gathering and information sharing and idea generating. So we met last week and talked about it several times. We're going to meet tomorrow and talk about it. So we're gearing up to see what information we think we need to have ready to present, and then what questions we also want to have prepared to solicit responses. So I believe he was interested in starting these meetings as soon as this week, probably or next week at the latest, depending on when we can kind of get the registration process pulled together. He might be working through the HOA, so that continues to evolve.
Thank you. And Director Lieber, you will keep us advised of those as well, because obviously, you know, some might want to attend, some might not. And in the count of the number of people, a council person, for example, might have to step seriously back from the group to not be in that same number count, so that it could be more of a resident participation, you know, for the mayor to address the residents. But certainly, I think it would be helpful, you know, for council members to attend if they did in fact want to.
Noted.
Thank you. Okay, if there's anybody else, anything else? Mrs. Brewer, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Sure.
Woman, is there some sort of document, like logging all the history of these problems, where a resident can have access to some sort of log of what's been done and what's proposed?
You know what? I don't think that there's a collective document, meaning one place you could go to for that. But I think that, Mrs. Brewer, if you want to either contact myself or Councilman Schuman, I think either of us could assist you with some information that you might want. If you want to call our clerk of council to go ahead and give him your contact information, perhaps email. I don't want you to put it out over, you know, public airwaves here unless you want to do that. But if you give him your phone number and email address, then we can be in contact with you, because certainly I know Councilman Schuman is very interested in the conversation with his residents, and I believe you are his resident. But as the environmental chairperson of the committee, I'm equally happy to help as well. So I think between the two of us, we can, you know, help you along with answering questions that you may have of things that were done in the past. But sadly, there's not just one thing that we could say, here it is, we'll email it to you. If there were, we certainly would. It's public record.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
All right, and you know how to contact our clerk of council?
No, I don't. Sorry. I suppose it's on the website, northolmsted.com.
Yes, ma'am, it is. And that would be
right.
Chuck Massarolo.
Okay. All right.
And we're all happy to help you.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Is there anything else, Mrs. Brewer, that you'd like to?
They're talking about a possible putting in something on Fitch, which is very close to me, a sanitary something or other. What would that be? A culvert or widening or what?
Yeah, Mr. DeFranco, do you want to just kind of in layman's terms, kind of just give a quick overview without engineering detail?
Sure. It would be basically an underground tank to hold sanitary sewer flow until it can be released into the sewer. So to help with flooding.
Hold sanitary sewer. That doesn't sound good. Well, and smelly, but well,
what it does,
like
Mr. Brewer, it collects all of the water, if you will. Let's just call it water, and then at an appropriate time, it slowly releases it into our wastewater treatment plant, if that's where it's supposed to go, or if it's a storm, then it slowly releases it into the storm sewers as they are capable of handling that drainage. So it sort of just collects it like a giant bathtub.
All right.
of sorts,
Okay.
and then
Thank you.
slowly drains it out as the system can handle it, so it's not burdening, a full system. Does that
Yeah.
help you?
Well, the idea doesn't help me, but at least you answer my question. It just
Well,
doesn't
hopefully,
sound very like
but
a good thing. But
I'm I'm hopeful though that we'll be working to solve the problem.
all right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll go one last round of if anybody wants to have a
Madam
comment.
Chair,
Yes.
I just was gonna offer up for Ms. Brewer, if she wants the council office phone number, I can give it to her.
Sure.
If she wants to stay on after
Yeah.
the call here for a minute, wrap up the meeting, I can give her the number. Or I can just give it to her right now, whatever you prefer.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
It's 440-716-4143.
And I'm sorry, what is your name again, please?
Chuck Masserolo, I'm the clerk of council.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there is nothing else going once, twice, check see any hands or any interest?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. And so Director Lieber, I look forward to getting a report sometime next week, in the next 10 days or so. I know you've probably got a lot and weren't expecting that to pop up. So I will have patience with regard to that. And I appreciate everyone's time. And I would like to conclude this meeting at 8:34. Thank you.